Welcome to Avagma. My name is Ramani Subramanian, and I wish each one of you a very pleasant good morning. It's a lovely Sunday morning out here. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Aditya Sondhi, our guru of today. He is going to speak to us on a very exciting subject called India After the Verdict, the first 100 days. As you all know, this has been a much debated topic both in the general press and in the media channels. Before I formally introduce Dr. Aditya, I wish to say a few words about our Guru Talk series. Now, this is an online event, and a great deal of effort goes into it by the technical support provided by our team. Sometimes our guru speaks not just from Bangalore, from our studios, but from other centers in India. We also had a speaker who spoke to us from Abu Dhabi. So there is this great technical support provided to us by our team. They work very hard and in the background. There is also a help desk that stands by to help last-minute registrations and provide whatever relevant technical support are needed for the students. There is one aspect of the tremendous amount of planning and organization that goes into the Guru Talk series. I'd like to tell you very briefly about the second important aspect, that is planning the subject, identifying and locating the speaker. And most of our speakers are very eminent people. They travel a great deal. They're not available in India when we want them. So to get them to say yes is a big task. And that is why we are particularly grateful to Dr. Aditya Sondhi this morning, that despite his very heavy schedule, he has very kindly consented to come and speak to us on this subject. Dr. Aditya is a senior advocate of the High Court of Karnataka and the Supreme Court of India. He is an old boy, having graduated from Bishop Cotton Boys School, Bangalore, from where he moved on to do his honors in law from the National Law School of India, University, Bangalore. Incidentally, he is a visiting faculty there. Thereon, he took his master's in political science. He was awarded his PhD by the University of Mysore for his thesis on the interface between the army and the democracy, India and Pakistan compared. He has also authored a book published by Penguin, which is entitled Unfinished Symphony. Dr. Aditya is a much sought after speaker and has written extensively on matters of political and legal significance. This is how the Guru Talk proceedings will happen this morning. Our Guru, Dr. Aditya, will speak for about 45 minutes. Thereafter, a question and answer session will follow. And finally, there will be the vote of thanks provided, after which the session will be called to a closure. May I now request Dr. Aditya Sondhi to come online. Welcome, Dr. Aditya.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramani, for that introduction. I hope I'm audible to everyone. And thank you, each of you, for tuning in to listen to this conversation. I must confess it's a little unnerving to be speaking only to a laptop. Perhaps you can see me, but I can't see you, which is not quite the best situation for a speaker. But nevertheless, I'm happy to be here today at Professor Ramani's invitation, and I look forward to this conversation with all of you. First and foremost, I like the phrase Guru Talk. There was a lot of anxiety when Teachers' Day wanted to be renamed Guru Divas. I'm glad that you folks at Avagma have had no such disquiet in referring to this session as Guru Talk. I can see the Sanskrit leaning in your institution's name itself, Avagma, which means intelligence, and hopefully we will have an intelligent discourse in the course of the day today. Before I give you my perspective on the first 100 days of this government, let me first make a quick comment about the verdict itself. The verdict, which came 3 months ago, was an overwhelming mandate of the people of India for change. And that suggested an inclination for change from status quo, a need for stronger governance, a need for stronger leadership, and for a leadership that articulates and delivers equally. I think we can all safely say that that was lacking, especially in UPA 2. Equally, I think this verdict was a verdict against division, against new alternatives. You know what I'm talking about. The Aam Aadmi Party came up, I thought, at one stage as a very strong contender in mainstream politics, but then its unusual methods and its hit and run politics in Delhi actually made it a sort of a walkover for this NDA government, which came through with an overwhelming and thumping majority. And that's really the note on which I want to begin. That you have a government now that has a clear and an overwhelming mandate to govern, which makes it possible that it may yield to majoritarianism. And that is really the note on which I want to discuss and analyze the initial performance of this government. When you look at 5 years of governance, having played some cricket myself, I can equate it to a test match. And 100 days in 5 years is no more than the first session of a test match. And the first session of a test match can scarcely tell you enough about the strengths and weaknesses of a team, and more so about the likely outcome of the test match. But what it certainly can do is tell you what sort or what brand of cricket a team might play. And there, I think, as much as it is still rather early in the game to form judgment on this government, but I do think that these 100 days give us a glimpse of how this government intends to perform, what its attitudes are going to be, and how it's likely to deliver on those promises. A note on the Prime Minister first. I think the Prime Minister, in terms of his aggressive, outspoken, clear, and assertive stand on matters and brand of leadership, is generally welcome. We were accustomed to a brand of leadership which was quite impassive, not communicative enough, not assertive enough. And there, I think straight away, the Prime Minister, with his pre-election speeches and so also his post-election speeches, has clearly, I think, hit bullseye in terms of the manner in which he is speaking to his people. Just the recent talk on Teachers' Day, where he referred to the linkage between the availability of separate toilets for girl students and their continuing in primary education, I think showed a very nuanced understanding of policy issues. I have been appointed the amicus curiae by the High Court of Karnataka on a public interest litigation pertaining to the implementation of the Right to Education Act. And I can tell you, a subtle point like this shows a close study and understanding of policy issues and how they need to be addressed in larger public interest. However, one can't equate a Prime Minister with the government. No doubt in our parliamentary form of government, the Prime Minister leads from the front, and he and his cabinet have equal responsibility. They sink or sail together, and no doubt the Prime Minister is in many ways the voice of the government. But equally, I think to analyze the performance of the government, one needs to look at the common or the collegiate steps that the government has taken over the last 3 months. Now, I can tell you for sure that my feeling on this government is that it has the will and the ability to move quickly. There's no doubt about it. Is that a good thing or not? We'll come to in a little while. But this I say because it has the ability to move not only on executive matters, but even on legislative matters. When the Prime Minister was to appoint his Principal Secretary, Mr. Mishra, friends, an amendment bill was brought to get over a disqualification that he suffered. That disqualification was on account of the fact that he had served as the chairman of the TRAI and was not eligible to take up an appointment such as the principal secretaries. That disqualification was in fact removed by an amendment moved through Parliament. So literally it was a one-man legislation that was brought in, but the fact that the government could act on that front quickly shows you its ability to move on such matters. The most serious legislative development, which is something that I have a personal interest in, was the National Judicial Appointments Commission, which, as you know, has been introduced in both houses, has been passed, and has now been sent to the states for its ratification. Because it's not only a legislative amendment, it is in fact a constitutional amendment. And the fact that a constitutional amendment can be pushed through on a matter of such serious significance, forthwith, with unanimity, tells you that if this government sets out to do something, it pretty much will do it. My degree of comfort on this NJAC bill is low. I don't think it's the solution that the country needs. The whole concept of collegium appointments, appointment of judges by judges themselves, came about through a development in the law which was a reaction to a phase in Indian emergency when senior judges in the Supreme Court were superseded simply because they did not toe the line of the government of the day. And therefore the collegium system came about as a whiff of fresh air to bring about a degree of complete independence of the judiciary from executive interference. Something the Chief Justice of India has articulated just yesterday in saying that judicial independence is non-negotiable. And I think you will agree with me that judicial independence cannot be negotiable or influenced in any way, because you don't want judges who are appointed because of their political leanings and then who carry their political leanings onto the bench. Do you know the hazard with that? That if you have judges who have political loyalty, then their judgments are going to reflect that loyalty. Their judgments are going to be pro-government, be it in a tax matter, be it in a constitutional matter, or for that matter, be it in a criminal case. And therefore, there is no doubt, I think, that judicial independence has to be preserved fully. I realize that this is not the crux of my topic, but I do want to comment on this bill. As much as I am impressed with the speed and efficiency with which the government is moving in terms of making sweeping reforms, I do also think that this particular amendment has not been fully thought through, because what it really does is it replaces an existing collegium system with a new collegium system. It doesn't bring the change that is actually needed. What the collegium system needs is greater transparency, greater criteria, a better method to appoint judges. But I do not think this amendment meets that objective. On that score, let me also talk about another decision that the government has taken relating to the judiciary in a sense, which is the appointment of a former Chief Justice, Justice Sadasivan, as the Governor of Kerala. Now, there's been a lot of debate and I would say unfortunate criticism of this decision. Let me tell you objectively, I have no difficulty with a former Chief Justice being appointed the Governor. The reason for that is that it's actually a merit appointment. We've seen that governors' appointments have become political appointments, which they are not supposed to be. The moment the government changed, you saw that all former governors of the UPA were nudged out of office and replaced with people believed to be closer to the establishment. That's really, friends, not how governors are supposed to be appointed. Governors are supposed to be neutral ombudsmen who don't have any political leaning. And certainly, governorship is not supposed to be a reward for political loyalty. And in that sense, when a former Chief Justice is appointed as a governor, I think it's actually a merit appointment because you're picking somebody who doesn't belong to the political class and you're picking somebody who has followed an intellectual profession, has been in public service, has retired at the top, and therefore can use his good offices as a jurist, as a mediator, as somebody who knows about administration objectively in a state and actually be a via media between the government at Delhi and the government in Kerala. But having said that, I think there is a valid question asked about retiring Supreme Court judges taking up any offices. And I think that is the question that needs to be addressed. It's not about governorship versus tribunal appointments versus commission appointments. The point is there a need to have an embargo, just like civil servants have, like Mr. Mishra as chairman of TRAI had? Is there a need to say that a judge of a Supreme Court or a High Court, upon retirement, shall not take up any service with the government for, say, a period of 2 years? That may be a healthy change, and I welcome that debate. I don't have a position on it as yet in terms of saying it should be 2 years or 1 year or 3 years. I'm also aware that most tribunals in the country, especially important central tribunals, appellate tribunals, mandate that retired Supreme Court judges must head them. So if you introduce an embargo, are you cutting off the supply of judges to these tribunals? So therefore, this is not an easy question to answer. But I do hope that this government will use this case of Justice Sadasivam's as a test case now to move towards some reform in the law when it comes to the question of judges holding offices after their retirement. Friends, apart from the legislative actions that have been taken or have been proposed, one of which I must mention is the proposed amendment to the Juvenile Justice Act. Again, I think I would say a knee-jerk reaction. The brutal Delhi rape case, where one of the worst perpetrators was supposed to be a boy who was a minor, no doubt 17 years plus, led to this outpouring of angst amongst the people in India that juveniles must also be graded when it comes to punishment for offenses. And therefore now, I think in a reaction to that case at large, the government has proposed an amendment to the Juvenile Justice Act whereby minors, that is minors above the age of 16, can be amenable to regular trials and to regular punishment through the process of the court for certain heinous offenses. Now, at first blush, people may say this is a welcome change, but let me tell you, the jury is out. If I hear people who've worked with children, people who've done work on juvenile justice, they will tell you that this is a very dangerous trend. Considering the inherent lacunae that our criminal justice system already has, to then expose a critical mass of our population, minors at that, to this process, I think can result in a generation of under trials being scarred for life. So again, I say that I have some misgivings about this particular amendment. But what does it tell you? It tells you that this government is not going to sit put. It's going to move all guns blazing. I've seen the same sort of urgency when it comes to other administrative or executive decisions. Take, for instance, the decision to annul the Planning Commission. Now, the Planning Commission, one would say, I think, has served its purpose. Whether it served its purpose fully well or not is a different question. But the very fact that this government thought it fit to do away with the Planning Commission, I think, tells you that it wants change, and it wants change to be seen. The Planning Commission is not a statutory or a constitutional body, so there's really no difficulty in scrapping it. It's not like the Election Commission, which has a constitutional status. The Planning Commission, being a creation of a government order, an executive order, can easily be revoked by virtue of a similar government order. And this government has wasted no time in taking a decision on that front. Take also, for instance, the decision of this government to constitute what is known as the National Wildlife Board. Now, there is a mandate as far as this Wildlife Board is concerned. It is supposed to be representative of NGOs, people working in wildlife, government, and experts. And if one looks at the constitution of this board, it doesn't even come close to that expectation. As a result of which, the composition of this board has been stayed, or the functioning of this board has been stayed by the Supreme Court. Obviously, on a prima facie finding that this board does not reflect its statutory objectives. But in the same breath, I'm refreshed to see that the government has recently announced that it proposes to come up with a new IPR policy for the government and for the nation. I think that's a very refreshing change. Intellectual property in India is often neglected. I represent the National Biodiversity Authority in cases involving the manipulation or the conversion, if you will, of fruits and vegetables using the BT, biotechnology. And that entire body and that entire statute and exercise of having a National Biodiversity Authority was undertaken with a view to preserve India's natural resources. What greater IPR do you have, or what greater resource do you have than your own existing eco-resources? And if the genetic makeup of those resources is going to be altered without any oversight, then I think we're sitting on a ticking bomb. So this proposed IPR policy, I haven't seen its text as yet because it's work in progress. But this proposal of having an IPR policy, which hopefully will cover everything from our bioresources to our geographical resources to, of course, our intellectual property in the private sector, information technology sector, our IPR relating to our branding, to our copyrights in our arts, music, and so on, and of course, in the invention and innovation that we bring in technological patents and so on, I think is a very exciting step. I hope that this government sees it through. It does, again, tell me that this government is not here to maintain status quo. Equally, friends, when I look at the trend when it comes to our foreign relations, one can see changes taking place. I was in conversation with a former ambassador of India to China last night, and he mentioned to me that this government needs to be assessed not only for what it's done, but for what it's not done, which I think is a subtle point. Because as much as this government has come as a reaction to the former government, I can assure you that this need to change the status quo cannot be equated with the need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. By that I mean that this government is obviously maintaining status quo on a lot of macro policy decisions. The changes are there to see. They're fast, they're obvious, and they're structural also. But at the same time, we must realize that there are a lot of systems in place, especially when it comes to foreign relations, which have been set over governments across generations, across bureaucracies, which have been tried and tested. And those are the sort of structures that I don't think this government wants to change overnight, especially I think matters which relate to foreign relations. So no doubt, I think we've seen a more, how do I put it, a more activist foreign hand, a foreign attitude from this government. If you look at the first decision that this government took to invite friends from various countries, including Pakistan, to the swearing-in ceremony. I think that was a coup in itself. And the later follow-up that this government has made in terms of visiting Nepal, Bhutan, Japan, which I think was a masterstroke, cultivating friendships, building on old friendships, telling your neighbors that we need to work together, I think is a masterstroke. And one can see the effects already. I've seen that the Prime Minister has been well received in all of these countries. There is a proposed visit to China, and hopefully we will improve our relations with Sri Lanka. And if we do that, I think we're going to find that our international relations identity is hopefully going to be a little sharper than it was earlier. I'm intrigued by our position on Pakistan because my PhD, in fact, was on civil-military relations in India and Pakistan, and I've more or less, I think, understood more than India how Pakistan works. And I can see very clearly the platform being set for another coup in Pakistan. Imran Khan and Qadri are simply a front for the army in Pakistan. They're there to upset the apple cart so that if the army thinks it fit, it steps in to the political game. Of course, whether it will do it or whether it will let Nawaz Sharif run another round in a slightly subdued way, I can't say. But I can tell you one thing for sure, friends, that this posturing is taking place in Pakistan simply because the military wants to reassert itself. And that's the way the cookie crumbles in Pakistan. There's no doubt about it. But I'm interested to see how India is reacting to its favorite neighbor, if you will. And though the initial sort of hand of friendship was extended, the alacrity with which we cancelled secretary level talks the moment the foreign secretary, the ambassador of Pakistan met certain Harriet leaders tells you that we are equally able to play hardball. And we're able to play hardball because obviously this government thinks Jammu and Kashmir is non-negotiable, which in a sense it should when it comes to Pakistan. But the fact that we were able to take a hard line and say, sorry, no talks, tells you that we do actually feel pretty confident of our position vis-a-vis Pakistan. And we're actually telling Pakistan that you need to get your act in order if you want to talk to us. People have also said that many leaders across the world prefer to talk to the military rather than the democratic leaders in Pakistan. But I would not go that far as to say that is the motivation. I do actually believe that our posturing with Pakistan is pretty straight and pretty strong, which I think is again a refreshing change. Obviously, if I talk about Pakistan, Jammu and Kashmir can't be far away. Now, Jammu and Kashmir, just because of this natural calamity that occurred over the last week or so, has, I think, in a way, surfaced or resurfaced on our collective conscience. Just because of the fact that J&K was out of reach by and large over the last few decades, made it this kind of black hole in our political space. People just don't look at Jammu and Kashmir the way they look at, say, Karnataka or Kerala or Madhya Pradesh or Bombay or Delhi. That's equally true of the Northeast. But when these floods occurred in J&K and you saw your own people helpless, I think that human empathy made us relate to the state a little more. It certainly did in my case. And it's actually brought J&K now into our collective conscience a little more, I believe, simply because of an act of God. And what we've seen there is that it's not so much the government, it's not so much the state government that has acted, but it's the Indian Army. So the Indian Army, which was the villain in the J&K all these years, some would say with cause, AFSPA, human rights violations, etc. That's not really my theme. But the same organization that was regarded as the villain in the piece is now being hailed as the hero. And therefore, I want you, friends, to think about the role that these, how do I put it, soft institutions play in our governance. Government is not just Delhi. Government is not just the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister or the Foreign Minister. Government is actually other institutions working between the lines, working in social situations and doing their job. The Supreme Court does that, which is why I was keen on harping on its independence. Equally, the army does that, and that needs to be recognized. But if I talk about the army, then it's only fair that I talk about the defense ministry. And I'm very surprised to see that a government like the BJP, like the NDA, which brands itself as a nationalist government, brands itself as being more nationalist than the others, would not devote a full-time minister to the defense ministry. I find that really surprising. And this is even more surprising considering the fact that it is your finance minister who shares the defense portfolio. The finance portfolio as it is more than a full portfolio, let me tell you. It's more than a full-time job. And Mr. Jaitley has his hands full with that portfolio. He's done a fairly good job, I thought, with his first budget. I'm not an economist. I don't know enough about economic matters to make too many comments, but I do think that that first budget was a very balanced budget in the sense it didn't promise too much, which I think is smart. It didn't go there and say we're going to reinvent the wheel, only to then let down the people by not delivering on promises. So they've actually started gently, they've started slow, which I think is shrewd in a way. And at the end of the day, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If this government can actually meet its growth deadlines, can cut inflation and do what is needed, people will value it at the end of 5 years. And you will not judge it simply based on one budget or the other. But to give the same honorable minister a shared portfolio of defense, I think is quite unfair. It's unfair to the defense services. These services need attention. They need ammunition, literally. They need support. Procurement in the defense forces is at a pretty dicey position right now. The previous government was just not able to move even 2 inches forward when it came to matters of procurement. They smelled a rat in every procurement. Anonymous letters to the defense ministry were taken up seriously. Investigations were ordered, as a result of which no project or no deal could proceed. And these are, in any case, extremely high value deals. They are known to have kickbacks in them. But the point is, if you're going to be paranoid about signing any contract, then how are you going to get better ships? How are you going to get better aircraft? How are you going to get better ammunition and amenities? And we saw what happened. The INS Sindhu Raksha incident, the other horrible incidents in the Navy, the MiG crashes, the fact that the naval chief had to resign, I thought very honorably because of this, is a message that the government needs to take seriously. The same army that's there serving you in J&K needs better boots, it needs better training, it needs better officers, it needs better infrastructure. And I'm therefore not only disappointed, I'm very surprised that a government like this would place the defense at a low priority. I hope that this is quickly corrected. Finally, friends, I do realize I'm running out of time. I want to make a quick comment or a reflection on what the softer side of this government is going to be like. I'm pretty clear that when it comes to economic policy, foreign policy, and so on, this government is going to be cut and dried. And one can see that. But equally, let us not forget that this is a government that is ideologically close to certain right-wing groups. It's close to the RSS. The RSS is seen as the larger family to which the BJP belongs. And what is the influence of that going to be on this government, I think is a very important question. I'm not able to answer it right now because these are still early days. But if one looks at certain utterances of leaders from the RSS, one can see that steps are being taken to reinforce, if you will, the Hindutva identity of the country. Now, I'm a little uncomfortable with it because as far as I'm concerned, we're a republic and we function under a constitution. We have a constitutional identity. When we say we are secular, we mean that the government has no place in religion. So I do only hope that the cultural progress, the cultural report card of this government is going to be equally cut and dried and impressive and does not in any way push any agendas. So we need therefore to keep a close look on how this government functions when it comes to matters of education, when it comes to matters of environment, of ecology, when it comes to matters of human rights. The Home Minister recently said that it's a carte blanche for the police forces and the other special task forces when it comes to tackling Maoism in certain states. That's in a sense a welcome statement. But does that also mean a carte blanche when it comes to human rights abuses? I don't know. And those are the things I think we need to keep a close eye on. We need to keep a close eye on how this government deals with NGOs, for instance. There was an IB report that sought to blacklist a number of NGOs on the ground that they receive foreign funding. Now, all of this has to be watched very closely because this can't become the way for a government to suppress criticism, to suppress a sector that actually shines light on what the government is doing. By that I mean we should not go the China way. China may be dominant economically, but it has a pathetic record when it comes to human rights, when it comes to liberal democratic rights of its people. And I do think we need to keep a close look on it. I do think we need to keep a look on the way this government works with the media, the way this government works with the private sector, for instance. Is there going to be government interference in media appointments? The media is getting corporatized. So will the corporate sector get politicized? I think these are aspects we need to keep an eye on. Finally, I began by saying that this government, in a sense, represents majoritarianism. I'm not putting any value judgment on that. I'm just saying that it represents overwhelming majority status. But majoritarianism also comes with certain downsides. Majoritarianism can lead to alienation of minority, marginalized constituents in the country. By that, I mean, A, the religious minorities. Now look at what's happened in UP. The scale of communal violence in UP, I don't think has been talked about enough. And I'm pretty sure that the central government could legitimately consider the imposition of president's rule based on the facts on hand. I'm not saying it must do it, but I'm saying it could. And the important thing for me is that the government in Delhi must be seen in Uttar Pradesh. It must be seen in the houses and villages of those minority communities, which I can tell you have been targeted very brutally. Equally, I mean political minorities. We don't today have even a leader of the opposition in parliament. Obviously, the Congress was routed. That's a no-brainer. But the point is, do we not need some opposition with a voice to keep the government on its toes? And I do hope that this government acknowledges its opposition. It's very easy to ignore a minority opposition like we have today. But I do hope that it acts as a responsible government and regards its minority opposition in its larger decisions. Finally, how is this government going to deal with its ethnic minorities? How is it going to deal with its sexual minorities? I say that because the Supreme Court, unfortunately, in my respectful view, reversed the judgment of the Delhi High Court and upheld the validity of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. That section, as you know, criminalizes homosexuality. And people were hopeful that the government would amend the law and bring about a change in that particular provision by legalizing homosexuality, at least when it came to consenting adults in a private environment. Will this government do it with its strong Hindutva, strong leanings on matters of morality, if you will, is a question to be asked. My feeling is it may not do it, but the very fact that the government has not yet said no and has said that it's open to this issue gives me a degree of hope. And I do sincerely hope that while this strong majority government, and I'm actually proud to say that we do now have an unequivocal government in place, and that this is a government that I hope and believe is keeping national interest at heart. But I do hope that in all of this, it does think of those who don't have voices and those who remain unsung in our political arena. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aditya, for that very frank, very equitable and balanced point of view on the first 100 days. I think we all share the sentiment expressed by you that the 100 days is a very short period, but I think the way you have analyzed what has happened in these 100 days is absolutely wonderful and augurs well for the future. I now invite the audience to pose any questions they may have to Dr. Aditya. He has another appointment at 11, but he has very kindly offered to field 5 or 6 questions in the next 10-15 minutes. So you may start your question sessions right now. All right, let me, with your permission, ask the first question. Dr. Aditya, if I may.
Please, sir.
The Prime Minister is expected to visit Washington in the end of this month. What do you think is the most important issue that's going to crop up between him and President Barack Obama?
Difficult question to answer, Professor, but I do think that the focus of Washington right now is on what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening in Pakistan, what's happening in those regions, and especially the emergence of the ISIS. And I wouldn't be surprised if I find that the US actually talks to India now on equal terms, because having India as a strong partner in Asia helps the US maintain its own balance of power. As much as it wants India to set off the dominance of China, it also wants India to stay, I think, at a low growth rate so that it doesn't feel threatened. And I think that is the hallmark of American-US policy, in the sense that it's a little inscrutable. It's very selfish. But having said that, I think considering what's happening in Pakistan particularly, and the emergence of the ISIS, and the fact that the US regards Narendra Modi as a strong contact point for decision making, Washington is going to look at India, I think, now on more equal terms. It's going to look to it as an important balancing force in Asia, so that it ultimately furthers American interests.
May I just persist with one more question, with the permission of the audience? Do you think that the US will look at the role of India as far as the Iraqi problem is concerned from the point of view of a third party, like they did for the Neutral Nations Repatriation Commission in Korea? Or do you think they will ask for participatory support?
I think asking for participatory support may be going a step too far. I'm not sure if they're going to risk doing that, but because that can be seen as precipitating matters at a global level. And that's not the sort of risk the US wants to take again. It did that earlier when it got the forces from the UK involved in the post-Saddam Hussein era, and they're still paying the price for that. And therefore, I don't see them going that far. They're certainly going to look at India playing an indirect and a remote role in maintaining the situation in these parts. A, by possibly keeping Pakistan in check, by keeping situations neutral, and possibly also, I think, as you rightly referred to, the peacekeeping role that one may have to play, because India has actually got a fine tradition of peacekeeping forces. We've done it in Korea. We've done it worldwide. We've done it in Cyprus, in Greece. And therefore, it may be possible that that aspect will be looked at. But I do believe that the priority item in this regard is going to be as to see how India can be used as an important countervailing, balancing force in these parts.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'll now pass the mic on to the students. Over to you, students.
And I'll read them out to you so everyone, I think, knows what I'm answering. One is from Biju. Due to globalization and worldwide markets, the interests of Indian farmers are often challenged. What will the approach of this government be to the primary bar production sector? I think that's an excellent question. As I said, I'm not an expert on matters of macroeconomic policy, but I think you've touched a chord in terms of saying that there is a very key constituent, which is the Indian domestic agriculture sector that requires protection. I know for a fact, in my experience with this entire BT episode, that market is up for grabs. The long arm of globalization has already reached the smallest farmlands in North Karnataka, which is, some would say it's a welcome change, but I think a lot of them will say that it's a very scary and a very dicey development. You'll be surprised to know, friends, that in the Philippines, it took a judgment of the Supreme Court of the Philippines to prevent Monsanto from going ahead with biotech trials in that country. And it's such a beautiful judgment. So I don't have anything specific to say in terms of what should be done, but I'm very certain that the fact that farmer suicides are occurring at the rapidity that they are in India, I think is a shame for us. And if we are going to globalize and develop as lopsided urban states, I think we've lost the plot. We must focus on this sector. And I'm hoping. The question is from Ashutosh. Why does only the US government take a step to stop ISIS? Why does a unification of all countries be not initiated against ISIS? Look, Ashutosh, you must remember that as much as America pretends to be the savior of the world, all of its actions are predicated on economic interests. It was oil all along. And today, it's got itself into a situation where some of the monsters it's created, including the Al-Qaeda, have come back to scare it in its own backyard. So they've really got onto a tiger that they can't jump off. And no matter how this whole ISIS issue is branded as an international threat and so on, take it from me, number one, the interests of the Americans are always going to be private and selfish. Secondly, as I tried to answer in Professor Ramani's question, precipitating this at a global level is going to take you down a very dangerous path. You don't want this issue to suddenly result in countries beginning to get polarized, which is why even with the Gaza-Israel issue, or for that matter with North Korea, or interestingly with Serbia and Russia, you haven't seen people go as far as they should have, because you run the risk of making this into, to put it crudely, making this into a world war situation. Nobody wants to take those chances today. And therefore, that may also be another reason why it's not being internationalized at the level that some may expect. There's a question from Sukumar. What may be the strategy regarding GST? Interesting question. This is a proposal that's been on the anvil. A proposal like this, I think, has to be understood vis-a-vis the interests of the states. I'm glad you brought this up, because when I talked about a majoritarian government, I wanted also to say that a majoritarian and a strong union government in Delhi must also think of its states, and not only the states where it has its own BJP chief ministers, but also states from other political alliances. So when you come to an issue such as GST, there's no doubt that it's a change that I think is needed, but it's not a change that can be introduced without the complete consent and comfort of all the states, because it has a direct impact on the revenues of the states. And therefore, as much as this government should move in that direction, I do hope that it does it with the concurrence of all the states involved, especially non-BJP states.
Just time to field one more. I'll just wait for 5 seconds if anybody is asking a question. All right. So since the questions have not been asked, with your permission, let me propose a vote of thanks. First to Dr. Aditya Sondhi for very kindly having accepted our invitation. And sir, we are extremely delighted at the great insight and the vision that you have demonstrated in your talk this morning. We have learned a lot. We have learned a lot that we need to wait more time to see what's going to happen with the new government. And we are confident that this little talk we had is going to help us to judge the shape of things to come better. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you saw the quality of the guru that we try to bring you every week. And we will pursue in this direction. And next month, on the 12th of October, we propose to have Dr. Professor S.L. Rao, who is the economist and the former Director General of the National Council of Advanced Economic Research. He's going to speak to us on another very important subject that is being much debated. It is the Achedin, and we are going to call that talk Great Expectations of the New Economic Policies of the Government. The month after that, that is in November, we have got an assurance from Mr. Charu Sharma, who needs no introduction to you, the cricketing icon. He will come over and talk to us about the lessons cricket has taught him. So with these few words, I wish to once again thank you all for taking time out to come and be with us in this Guru Talk session. And Aditya, thank you so much for that very insightful talk.